D-pad up, I need accolades. D-pad left, what's new this season? D-pad right, I want to race. D-pad down, disable head-to-head.
Okay, Chief. I have plotted your route to a nearby race event.
In a word, Forza Horizon 5, with a few caveats, as a gamer without sight, is incredible. Hello everyone, I'm Sightless Combat, and as an accessibility consultant and gamer without sight, I am pleased, thanks to a review code from Xbox, Playground Games and Turn 10, to be able to show you Forza Horizon 5's accessibility. Now, if you know...
Tanya Union set symbol, ahoy, matey.
If you know Forza Horizon, then
let's go on an adventure.
You will know...
Sightless Combat, hi.
You will know that Forza Horizon 4...
Tanya Union set symbol, ahoy, matey.
That's a system I'll come on to in a second. Forza Horizon 4 didn't really have much in the way of accessibility other than narrated menus. And specifically in terms of the open world, it was very much lacking. So I couldn't get from point A to point B without sighted assistance, which was a real shame because I really wanted to drive around Britain. Now, with this latest entry being set in Mexico, I was shocked to find that after, saving all my settings and applying all the assists and everything, I'm able to do what I'm about to show you now. So, I've set my course for a race event. I've set a route via Anna.
When it is safe to do so.
And you heard that's Anna there. She just said turn around when it's safe to do so. Now, without sighted assistance, you'd think, well, how am I going to do that? And I'm behind the wheel of a Ford Bronco, if you're curious. There we go. We are now definitely behind the wheel. We're going to very slowly drive forward in this kind of off-road area.
In 100
and kind of
meters,
coast
turn right.
Coast forward, and soon enough we will be on the open road. There you go. So this game, via the assists, has the ability to actually navigate you on routes. So if you set a route on the map, it will do it. Unfortunately though, that's one of the caveats. The map and various other menus in this game and pieces of content, so even going as far as things like HUDs at the end of races to show you if you've won, rewards, destination information, so how many kilometers you are away, stars in showcases. Parts of that aren't narrated, and a lot of that isn't actually, and you'll hear this menu is not narrated a fair amount as you play, which is a real shame because with a few small tweaks, I really reckon this could be the most accessible racing game, full stop, and it could be fully playable as well. Because currently, it's just one of those two. Because, if you'd have told me that this game was going to be accessible even to this degree before it launched, whoa, I wouldn't have believed you necessarily. But I'm so glad to see that I can just drive to events and most of the time complete them. Unless of course they're team events, in which case, because it's before launch, there aren't many people playing. So
Turn sharp left.
And all I'm doing is mostly just driving. I'm only steering occasionally as a reflex from Forza Motorsport 7, where if you didn't steer, you didn't get the rewards. At least that's what I remember reading at the time. Yeah, so the map isn't accessible, but that could be done. And there is a map filter as well, which could also definitely be narrated, I reckon. But honestly, even being able to get from place to place and use the system you heard earlier, which is Forza Link, because a lot of people were curious as to how accessible that would be. If I press left on my D-pad.
D-pad up, let's go on an adventure. D-pad left, high. D-pad right, perfection. D-pad down, oh no.
And if I press right on my D-pad.
Sightless Combat, perfection.
And it does what it says. It's very much like a sort of context-sensitive chat system, but it will work with things like convoys, so you can drive around and go to events and things, courtesy of the convoy leader. Oh, and changing cars is narrated as well.
In 400 meters, turn right.
But things like a lot of the customization stuff isn't narrated, so choosing designs isn't fully narrated yet, which is a real shame because then you're not sure whose
Turn
designs you're
right.
choosing. And of course there's no descriptions for those either. I'm going to handbrake turn. Reasonably smooth. Putting a little too much force behind it because the haptics were telling me to you know, ease off a little, which is great. You know, once you learn how these haptics work, it's a shame there's not tutorials for these. You know, that would really help new players, I think. But this is honestly the amount of time I've had this code for a while, this review code and review copy, and honestly this is the most amount of time I've ever spent in a Forza game, and I've had the most amount of enjoyment out of it in this state that it's in now, just being able to drive from place to place. That was me braking as well, so I can slowly ease us through the turn, slightly off-road. There we go, now we're on the open road again, on the racing line.
You have arrived at your destination.
And we've arrived. So, the prompts do speak. Let's back up very, very gently and see if it does. Hopefully it will. Because sometimes they've been
It's
known...
raining sideways. Estadio circuit. X button. Enter championship.
There we go. So we're going to enter this.
Estadio circuit. Option highlighted. Solo. Option 1 of 3. Control type. Button. Race solo against drive ATARs. A button select. B button back. X button view event information. Y button switch to normal event. Menu button view eligible cars.
So there is a lot of information here. A lot. And there is no way to adjust the narration speed, unfortunately. But who knows, that may be able to be added in a patch as well. Let's press X.
It's raining sideways. B button back. This menu is not narrated.
Ooh, and we find our first narrated, or non-narrated menu, I should say. So let's go back and we'll just go through these.
Co-op.
So
Option
co-op.
2 of 3. Control type. Button. Race cooperatively with other players against drive ATARs.
Does what it says on the tin.
Option highlighted. PvP. Option 3 of 3. Next PvP event begins in 2 minutes 20 secs.
Oh, okay. Is it not going to give
highlighted.
me the
PvP.
prompt?
Option
Well, not the
3 of
prompt, the
3.
other info.
Control type. Next PvP event begins in 2 minutes 10 secs.
Oh, I think it's interrupting itself because it can't read it quick
PvP.
enough.
Option 3 of 3. Control type. Button. Next PvP event begins in 2 minutes.
Oh, okay.
Option
We'll just leave that
highlighted.
alone.
Solo. Option 1 of
But we will
3.
go solo. And it will load in. I'm running on Xbox Series X. I have played the game on PC as well, and the experience is pretty much identical. Including, actually, input swapping, which is great. So it will recognize when you've actually swapped inputs from keyboard to controller. And it's telling me one of the eligible cars.
Group highlighted. Ford. Group 3 of 3. Option highlighted. Falcon XAGT Ho 1972 Ford.
Some of the
Option 4 of 4.
pronunciations are a little odd.
Group highlighted. By car. Group 1 of 3. Option highlighted. By recommended car.
If I wanted to buy a recommended car, I could. So I could just press this, go into here.
By recommended car. Group highlighted. Chevrolet. Group 1 of 2. Option highlighted. Corvette Stingray.
So the
427.
Chevrolet that we just
Group
saw.
Highlighted. Ford. Group 2 of 2. Option highlighted. Falcon XAGT.
And the
Ho
Ford that we just saw.
Loading.
So I'm going to go back out because I own both of these.
My cars.
They are both in my
Group
garage.
highlighted. Ford. Group 3 of 3. Option.
So let's go with...
Group 2. Option highlighted. Corvette Stingray 427. Option highlighted. Corvette Stingray 427.
I'm not sure why there's two here.
1967.
Could be
Group
I've bought a
highlighted.
duplicate by accident.
Group highlighted. Chevrolet.
Let's
Option
go for the
highlighted.
Ford.
Group highlighted. By car. Group highlighted. Ford. Group 3 of 3. Option highlighted. Falcon XAG.
Yep. And then we press A on that. And it loads us into the grid. So lovely crowd sounds as well. Getting the atmosphere there. And as you can hear, the weather's kicking in.
Option highlighted. Start race event.
Closer to
Option
British
1 of
weather
5.
than anything else, I
Control
think.
type. Option
So start
highlighted.
race.
Difficulty
You can
and
check the difficulty here.
settings. Option highlighted.
So if we go
Option
into difficulty
highlighted.
and settings.
Drive ATAR difficulty. Option 1 of 10. Control type. Value selector. Current value. Highly skilled. Value 1 of 1. This event uses a forced drive ATAR difficulty and cannot be changed.
So if we
B
back out
button.
carefully
Option
from this,
highlighted. Difficulty. Option 1 of 8.
and again,
Option
oh,
highlighted.
there we go.
Option highlighted. Start race
So we
event.
can actually
Option
see
highlighted. Tune car.
We can
Option
tune car from
highlighted.
here,
Starting grid.
but a lot of
Option
that
4
isn't
of
narrated
5.
when I tested.
Option highlighted. Starting grid.
So let's see where I am on the grid.
Cyclist combat. Option 8 of 12.
So in 8th on the grid. And where am I in the championship standings?
Championship. Option highlighted. Cyclist combat. Option 12 of 12.
I am apparently in last. Oh well. In which case, let's rectify that and start the race. So as you will soon see, this actually uses the same system as, you know, the open world. So you're using the game is using the racing line and following that, and giving small haptic cues as well where needed to make you slow down, like this. Let's change to the view I normally use for racing. Thankfully we haven't crashed yet, which is surprising. There we go. Surprising given the amount of cars on the road and the weather. There we are. The reason I use this view for racing is mostly because you can hear your opponents around you most of the time, or more easily than in other views. So it gives you those tiny little haptics there to slow down, but a lot of the time you can't react to those quickly enough. So we go around the corner, around this corner. There's normally crowds at the edges of the turns, which is, you know, what gives the impression of a corner, at least to me, without being able to see it. Because if you're unfamiliar as to, you know, why I say I'm a gamer without sight, it's because I have absolutely no sight whatsoever. Absolutely none. So doing this kind of thing is absolutely brilliant. I love it. Because it's not a thing you get to do very often, regardless of how much sight you've got, necessarily. So let's keep on driving. Let's change the view. Behind the wheel again. And there are 2 camera settings for each view, as far as I understand it. Let's keep going. Slow down slightly while we shift views once again. So we will show you changing cars as well. I will show that at the end of it. At the end of this race. Whether I win or not, because I don't know if I'm going to win. Not just because of the difficulty, but also because, you know, the information just isn't there for me. Which is a real shame, because it's always good to know how well you're doing and what checkpoints are there, what your XP boosts are, which are all flashing up on the screen if you can see, but aren't available there if you have no vision to work with. But once again, you know, this is one of many small tweaks that could be made to the game, or a few small tweaks, to make it fully playable with no assistance needed, because I think a lot of people would really appreciate that. Being able to play a racing game like this. Well, I think the other cars are catching up with us. That's just great. And if I didn't say we have a horn earlier as well, then we do now. Driving through very rainy weather here. The sound design is absolutely incredible. I love it. It's brilliant. And there's a real sense of like weight and speed to everything, of course, which you'd expect from a racing game, all about weight and speed and cars driving around at ridiculous velocities when they're in races. So we're just going to keep going. It's funny because you don't even know what lap you're on, and you just have to sort of take an educated guess based on the haptics, based on, you know, where you think, how much you think you've gone round. But I'm only steering because, you know, Forza Motorsport 7 taught me to do that, and it's hard to not do that. But hopefully they don't introduce strict penalties for not steering with the assists on, because that would be, I would argue, unfair to pretty much everybody who needs these assists or uses them even on a temporary basis as well, for whatever reason. Must be almost done with this. Probably. Round this turn. And, yep, I called it. So that's the finish. That specific sound cue means you've actually finished the race. And we will see cars zooming past the camera.
Estadio circuit. A button continue.
In
X
glorious
button
fashion. I think we might have
Y
won.
button watch replay.
Maybe.
This menu is not narrated.
And it says it's not narrated.
Championship. A button continue. X button restart. Y button watch replay. This menu is not narrated.
And again, not narrated, which is a real shame.
A button continue.
And usually that noise I've taken to mean you've done well.
A button skip.
And as you can hear, there's no clarification as to what these sounds mean.
Continue. Left. A button skip.
So this is a wheel spin, because it was introduced in a tutorial earlier in the game.
A button collect prize.
But it doesn't tell you what your prize is. And with that, we are out of that event, and it will just put us back on the sort of free roam
it's raining
environment.
Estadio circuit. X button. Enter championship.
Now, for one final thing, let's show changing cars.
Pause menu. Group highlighted. Cars.
So I'm in the pause menu, which does narrate.
Option highlighted. Buy new and used. Option highlighted. Tune car. Option 3 of 7. Option highlighted. Change car. 34 cars.
Let's change car.
My cars. Group.
Let's go with the car that I wanted to drive in Forza Horizon 4, but couldn't because it didn't have as much accessibility as this.
McLaren. Group 16 of 22. Option highlighted. Senna 2018 McLaren.
The McLaren Senna.
Select an action. Option highlighted. Get in car. Option 1 of 5. Control type. Button. A button.
And let's press that.
Car. Would you like to have this car delivered to you? A button.
And yes, I would.
Waiting for.
It usually says waiting for car delivery, but
D-pad down Anna. D-pad left link.
But now we are in the Senna,
circuit.
and we're going to ask Anna for a new race event.
Okay, Chief. You are partway through a seasonal championship. I have set your route to the next event.
Now, it doesn't always do that, but when it does,
200 meters. Turn sharp left.
when it does, it is very much appreciated. I'm going to try not to crash here. Even though this is a McLaren Senna that is designed as a ridiculously fast car, I do not want to crash because at times extricating yourself from a crash is very, very difficult. Though most of the time you'll be able to reverse your way out of it. And with the racing line being what it is, it actually works quite well. You've just got to be aware of how to disentangle yourself. Let's just stop here. And with that, we will end this demo. If you have any questions, there's a little XP thing that, you know, I'd love to have those as an optional narration thing, just to know what I'm doing or what I've managed to do as I drive along. And I understand that those might get a little overkill, but being able to turn the frequency of those up and down would be good, along with things like checkpoints as well. But we will end the demo here. I'd like to thank Xbox, Playground Games and Turn 10 for sending me the review code. And I've had an absolute blast with this game. And honestly, if it's this accessible now, I can't wait to see what happens by the end of this game's life cycle in a few years' time. Because we have the most accessible racing game on console right here. And probably on PC too as well, I'd imagine. And, you know, being able to do this all as a gamer without sighted assistance would be even better. And it will definitely, pun intended, drive the industry forward. In any case, I am Sightless Combat. Feel free to like, comment and subscribe. Thank you very much for watching.